Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming back to another interview. My name is Hannah.
Hi, my name is Jenna, and with us today we have another guest music therapist with us. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Vanessa Moran, and I'm a music therapist.
Awesome. Vanessa, tell us a little bit about how you found out about music therapy, how you decided this is the profession you wanted to pursue.
Yeah, so I was always like a little bit of like a secret nerd, I'd like to say, because it was not cool at the time. Now I'm like, who cares? But I was a teen. I was probably around 14 or 15 years old, and I was like super into science and math and everything, and I was like good at it. So I originally was like, maybe I'll study like neuroscience, maybe I'll study engineering, something along those lines. But I had been a musician my whole life, loved learning instruments, loved performing, and had just done it for, my entire childhood into college now. And a lot of my music mentors had kind of told me, they're like, it's a shame that you aren't like pursuing this talent and passion that you have. I was like, yeah, but like, I like to be realistic. So I used to watch a lot of TED Talks. I still do. I just think they're like so fascinating, a great way to like find things in the world that you just don't know about. And I happened upon one about music therapy. The specific music therapist was using music for like heartbeat regulation with like his wife. I just like wrote this is kind of what I remember of it, but he said something that just like truly resonated with me to this day, which was that music therapy as a field is the crossroads between music and science. And I went, that's it. That's what I'm going to do. And I better be good at it, because that's how it has to roll for me. So I was probably about like a sophomore in high school at the time, and then went on the journey of trying to find schools to go study music therapy at.
So, can you speak a little bit on the process for you in terms of looking and applying for schools and how you ended up choosing where you wanted to go?
Yeah, it was definitely hard. So I'm originally from New Jersey, and I like looked at the American Music Therapies Association's list of schools, and I was like, huh? Where are all of these? And at the time, this was when it was like 2015, 2016, there weren't as many as there are now. And I love classical music, and I really appreciate it. I love listening, and I think people that play classical music are like so phenomenal. It is not my voice type, and it's just not what I like wanted to learn. So then that narrowed it down even more to what schools are teaching contemporary music and jazz, and then also have a music therapy program. Because I did consider going to school for like a double major in music and science, or like in neuroscience, or occupational therapy, something like that, and then just doing a master's program. But I was like, why? When I know I want to do it, and I could do a bachelor's degree and be able to work faster. So all of these kind of components, and then looking into like, what did programs have to offer? What did it look like? I ended up being fortunate enough in a variety of ways to attend Berklee College of Music. I really like the program because there is hands-on like learning. So like every semester, at least when I was in the program, every semester you would like go to a site and you would do music therapy. And I was like, that's the best way for me to learn. I am not uh like I need to do it to be able to understand how to do it. So I was very fortunate to be able to go to that program and like get in and all that stuff and afford it. But that's kind of how it ended up happening. I applied to a few other places and also got in. It was really just a combination of all those three things.
When you look back on your college experience, what is something that you really enjoyed about the program and your experience in it? And what is something that, if you could go back, you would want to change or see grow within the program?
One of the things I enjoyed about the program was I got to try everything. So I am now a neurologic music therapist and only practice NMT. but like having the ability to like work with a variety of populations, a variety of different like styles of work and different types of work really like kind of got me like I was able to decide like, oh, I really like this and I'm gonna, you know, steal this, or like I like how this supervisor works and communicates with patients, or like, oh, this like is really not for me. Like I don't think I could do this every day of my life. Like I think that the work is valuable and I think I learned a lot, but I don't think it's for me personally. So that was one of the things I really enjoyed about the program. Things that I would love to see change and grow. I think that there's a lack of like really understanding of the day-to-day work. So the learning curve once I was out of the program was so steep. And I just felt like I had no support in learning that, if not for my supervisor, interns that were with me at the time, or like other therapists at the facility. So while I'm like, yes, I built my repertoire and I know how to be empathetic and I know these terms and anything, having to read a medical chart for the first time was nerve-wracking. Having to document in the style of like where like a doctor is going to understand what you're doing is like was very different from how we documented it at Berklee and at my school. And so things like that were just very steep. And I'm very glad for the guidance I received to get to the point I am at today. But I think those like hard skills like were not taught. It was a lot of like trying to build up like that soft skill of like what's your therapeutic presence, which I think is really important. But that's stuff that you learn when you're doing the work. It doesn't have to be classroom time. So I think that's what I would have liked to see change and grow, is like, this is classroom time and this is stuff that's appropriate for the classroom. And here are things to work on when you're at your sites, when you're with a supervisor, when you're with patients, and just see a clear distinction between those two.
I feel like we've talked about that quite a bit, like amongst ourselves, and then also with a lot of people that we've interviewed, of how hard that is, like moving into internship and moving into your first job, where those stepping stones feel so far apart, where you go from working like an hour or 2 hours, maybe if you're lucky, in a practicum in school, and then you're doing classes which are very different from working a full-time caseload. And learning how to do that is a huge adjustment for a lot of people, for sure.
Yes, I definitely like, there's nothing like, I love the work that we all do. Like that's my caveat to this thing I'm about to say. Is that I wish someone had told me how hard it is like on your body. Like when I am singing and playing the guitar for 6 out of the 8 hours of my work day for 5 days out of the week, like you don't really think about how those hours add up. And like where I'm like, why do my hands hurt? And I'm like, of course they are sore. Like you're just doing like really intense fine motor activity for like 6 hours. So it's like those like little things of like, or like, how do you go about saving your voice so that you don't have, you're not straining yourself, like things like that, or how can you adapt interventions to better suit your health needs as well, so you can do your job well.
Yeah. I also feel like I've heard people say like, and Jenna, you bring up a good point of when people are in practicum doing 1, 2, maybe 3 hours in a week for your practicum, you have a whole week to prepare for that 1 or 2 sessions that you have. But when you have 6 sessions in a day and you have 2 hours to do whatever else you need to do, including documentation and session planning and learning songs, that's a huge curve of doing day-to-day stuff besides having like a full week to do 1 session.
That was honestly one of my favorite things about being so one of my last practicum was an inpatient rehab facility. One of the best things was that who's to say what our schedule looked like? They change all the time. Patients come in and out every 2-3 weeks. So it was that like, you have to think on your feet. We don't know who we're seeing. That is a great skill to have, but also it's a terrifying skill to create. But yeah, I think about that a lot as well, like where while I'm like, it's really great to have students build their toolbox in that way where they can take all the time they want to think about an intervention and plan, this is what I'm going to do and this is what I'm going to say and this is I'm going to move to the next thing. It's also like we are a people profession, a people facing profession, and you can't expect people to follow your plan. So like, how can we better serve our students in that way as well? I don't have the answer.
So transitioning now a little bit towards end of college time into internship. What was that like selecting an internship? What were you looking for in an internship? What were you drawn towards? And where did you end up going?
I would not recommend anybody do what I did. So I like finished my college classes and my last practicum was in neuro rehab. So I work for the company MedRhythms.
Mm-hmm.
And I have just been with them since I was a senior in college. So it was with them. I was like, this is the work for me. I absolutely love it. Like it's everything that I had been like wanting for myself for music therapy and like just how you think about it, the research, all that stuff. And I was like, this is my internship. Manifesting it now. And I would like to say, this is going to come up later, I would like to like classify myself as like a really good like schmoozer, like to be rude about it, but like a big people person. So like I knew within the first few weeks that I was like, this is what I want to do. I need to absorb everything like a sponge in my practicum. But then I also was like, this is my supervisor is the person that is in charge of internship. So like we have to be like, I need her to just think that I'm fantastic. And that there's no impossible when it comes to Vanessa. So a lot of that was like building that rapport, building that relationship, really like learning the interventions, like taking in everything I could about neurologic music therapy and what the work that they do there is. A lot of like homework on my own time to like start kind of helping with that learning curve because I knew nothing. I applied for that internship with MedRhythms and none other ones. No one else received my application. My professors were like, there are other places that do NMT. And I said, no, I'm getting this one and that's that. And I did. My parents were also like, really? But it was one of those things I was like, if I don't get this, like it never hurts to like take some time to like grow as a person, learn who you want to be and like apply for other places is kind of my mentality because I was at home working anyways, like so like doing, a part-time job. So I was like, there's no harm in just applying for the one because I'm manifesting it. Then during my internship, I started in the end of January, beginning of February of 2020. So you can imagine how that went. Very exciting that the hospitals continue to have music therapy as an essential service to their patients, but no students were allowed in. So that was really hard. It all worked out. So I ended up doing a lot of, I ended up helping a lot, like doing a lot of projects to launch MedRhythms' current telehealth platform. So I was very much involved in making resources for that. And then once it was up and running, I was doing my clinical hours on Zoom, which was also another learning curve, but everyone was with me, so I didn't feel as bad about it. And then by the end, I had my own caseload on Zoom, and I was able to go back to the hospital for like one last month, maybe month and a half, to do like intense inpatient work where I was pretty much just like on my own and with my own caseload in that sense as well. So that's kind of how my internship went, which was definitely, I learned a lot about myself and how flexible we all have to be. Hopefully not again anytime soon. The after process was also hard because we were still very much in like that post-COVID, and we still are, time. There were a lot of places that were like not hiring because there weren't clients who wanted people to come into their home. Like, right, it makes a lot of sense for everyone we work with. A lot of the people that receive music therapy are immunocompromised, especially like when I think about our clientele, which, are people with neurodegenerative diseases or strokes, brain injuries. Like, they're on so many medications. It's like no one wants to risk that. So I did a lot of I like waitress, did like that to make money. And then I contracted with MedRhythms just because I don't have business acumen. So it was pretty much like I was going out and doing in-services in my community, talking to support groups, talking to hospitals to see if they would be interested in music therapy for anyone. And if I had anyone bite, then I could bring them over and be like, well, here's MedRhythms. This is our, how we do things. And then they would be part of my caseload. On the other end as well, if there was anyone on a wait list, then they would become a part of my caseload. So it was kind of like being able to work on both ends was very nice for me. As I was also like saving up money to like hopefully move once I was able to like work in person. By November 2021, yes, I was approached by MedRhythms because they had a hospital contract where I am right now at Burke Rehab Hospital in White Plains, New York, because they wanted neurologic music therapy. They wanted a therapist there 3 days a week. And they were like, Vanessa, we'd really like you to start this program for us. I like went through interviews and just to learn more about the job and see if I thought I was a good fit, if they actually knew and thought I was a good fit. I obviously was. I'm here now. And started that program in 2021 part-time, so 3 days a week. And we moved to full-time in November 2022.
So am I correct in thinking that MedRhythms' primary base is in Boston?
You are correct, yes. So we are primarily based out of like Spaulding Rehab Network, plus we have clinicians that do in-home and like telehealth, and the majority of our team is based in Boston. I'm based here in New York, and then our practice manager, Lacey Bell, is based in Philadelphia, and she does all telehealth. So this is like our second hospital contract, and we're kind of trying to build it up and get therapists that want to be here as well to be able to service this area.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's unique. So looking back and preparing for the CBMT exam, what was that like for you? What was that process of studying? How did you study? What was helpful for you? And then also taking the exam.
Yes. I have a knack for memorizing information. It's not really a knack. I just think of all of it like it's just like a study, way to study, I guess. I think of everything like it's gossip, and then my brain likes it a lot better. So like everything has to be like, if I say it interesting, or if I listen to something and it feels interesting, like it's easier for me to remember. I did like a little bit of like rereading on the parts that I knew I wasn't going to be good at, which is early childhood development, because I knew, all my professors knew, I like didn't want to work with children. One, because I think that kids deserve better. just because like I'm like, oh, like you're cute, but like stay away from me. Like they don't deserve that energy. And I also always just felt like working with kids was like really sad. Like I don't want to see kids in like the states where they require music therapy, even though I know it's so beneficial for them. It just is like not my mindset to think of. I'm just like, oh, this poor child. Like I wish that you didn't have to see me, like, and rather than thinking about like how can we move, like progress you, so it's just not my therapeutic mindset to work with kids. So I just knew I probably forgot everything because it wasn't what I needed to know at the time. So I did a lot of like review on those weaker areas, and then the big thing that helped was taking a practice test. That definitely just like gave me a lot more confidence in doing well. It also like helped me like thinking about like how the questions are written and understand the actual test itself. My advice would be you don't necessarily have to study material, you have to study what the test wants. Like, because you could know everything, and then if you don't understand what that they're actually asking you, then you're not going to get it right. So it's definitely understanding the language behind how they create questions, and then also obviously like knowing the right answer. But I'd say I took more time trying to like figure out the puzzle that is the wording of the questions than on studying itself. But once I took the practice test and felt good about it, I like passed my practice test. I was like, okay, cool. I'm gonna take it. Definitely weird to take just because it's like on a screen. I'm very much like a written person. They like let you have a piece of paper and a pencil. But I was like, but the questions aren't there. Like, how am I supposed to underline anything? But I would say one of the nice things is that they give you your score right away. So I took the test. It was, you know, the places where I didn't think I was going to get the answer. I don't harp over, you know, certain things. I was like, why was that a question? Is this something that I really need to know off the top of my head? Standardized tests are what they are. And then I passed and I was like, okay, great. But I would say the big thing that helped was just like understanding what the test was about over knowing anything about music therapy.
In terms of continuing education, what do you find has been really helpful for you in terms of getting those continuing education credits and recertification process? What do you find has been really helpful for you, and where do you really enjoy getting that information?
Mm-hmm. I'm a big believer in like do what you would like do what you enjoy, right? Because then you're gonna do it and you'll be like, oh yeah, well I have enough. So like I like talking. That's why they were like, Vanessa, you should do this interview. um so things that I do, I'm like, I take students, right? You get credits for having for being a supervisor. I also, you know, I'm like, man, I want to impart the knowledge that I have on a student and hope that their experience is a little bit better than mine, you know, or like I found out about NMT in the end of my schooling where I really just was like, I'm done with music therapy. I don't want to do it. And I'm just going to go and I'm going to do something boring, right? You're a senior in college and questioning life, but just like exposing people to what I do and what I'm passionate about is like one of my favorite things to do. So taking students, I do conferences. So in general, it kind of comes with the territory of starting a program as well, is like the amount of in-services and grand rounds and conferences that the hospital wants to do because they're like, look at our shiny new program and what we're doing to help patients, which I'm like, great, please, like, give me the money. I'm fine with that. Like, let's build, let's build, let's build. And everyone is so supportive of Burke. So like attending conferences, speaking at conferences, I love public speaking. I think I'm fairly good at it, especially like it's a great way to get to know the people that you serve, right? So like I've done the Brain Injury Association of New York conference this year and last year, which is mostly attended by survivors, and just being like, this is a service that works and is available to you, and like, what can we do to make this more accessible to you because we believe it works. You're seeing how it works, and like it could be the thing that like, you know, you love and that really helps you on your journey. So being able to like teach about music therapy in general and show the amazing impact of music is like something I love. But like in the same way, like, you know, if you really enjoy research and have that as an available avenue to you, like that's another way to get credits. Or if you know people and you can peer review a journal, I don't know, like X, Y, and Z. I would also say like don't feel you have to go to things that are only music therapy related. right? Like if you're really interested in speech pathology and like, you know, your work is with a population, like go to those conferences, see what the other like what other individuals are doing, learn more about what the interdisciplinary team does, because like that's the cool thing about music therapy is we can take all of these other things everyone's doing and say, well, like how can we make music make the change, right? How can we get the music to do what you're doing, but maybe even better, maybe more consistent, maybe we're more engaged in it. And like I don't want to say steal from other therapy disciplines, but like collaborate with them, find ways to incorporate music into rehab or into whatever population you work with. I just like it's a fun thing to be a therapist. You can go outside of your bubble and learn more and talk to experts, especially if you want to do public speaking. Like so many conferences, they want something new and exciting and innovative, and music therapy is it. Like just saying like, hey, I work with the population that you are talking about in your conference, and I have a new approach to work with them. It's like people love it because everyone loves music. Like it's all the same reasons why we know it works, but people just don't know. That's my piece on continuing ed credits is do what you like to do and they'll come.
So, working in the state of New York, I would love to hear you talk a little bit about licensure, what that's like, how that affects you or doesn't affect you in your job, and if there's some pros and cons that you see with that.
Yeah, so this is like a very interesting loophole that I work under. So I am not licensed because I'm not an arts counselor. I at Burke am here to do NMT and that's it. It was very much like presented that way to everybody on all levels, physicians, therapists, et cetera, et cetera. Every once in a while, we might get somebody who's like new and they'll refer me to somebody for traditional music therapy, for, you know, mood or their anxiety. And I just have to tell them like straight up, like that's outside of my scope of practice. I'm not a licensed music therapist. I'm only allowed to do this type of music therapy that does not involve counseling. So that's how I work in the state of New York. Because if I'm being completely frank, like it is really out of my scope of practice. I have not, you know, done traditional music therapy in many years, and I just think it would not be excellent quality of care nor beneficial to anybody, because I'm just not your girl for that. And everyone's very understanding of that. But once again, we get to like at the hospital at least, we can very much work like in an interdisciplinary approach. And if somebody does send that to me, I'm like, okay, like I'm out of the scope of this, but like we can tie in neuropsych, X, Y, and Z. Like I'm happy to drop off like general music or like talk to somebody else to see what we can do. Um, because even though it's out of my scope of practice, I do believe in the power of music. And obviously, right, it's just you don't want me to do it.
I'm curious what your experience has been co-treating with other within the interdisciplinary team in the hospital, and what kind of you have found yourself drawn to or really engaging in with other professionals.
I love co-treating with therapists. It's a great way to one learn, right? I'm always learning. I think once you decide like you know everything, then like you're not good. You're not going to be good at your job, right? Like once you start being complacent, then the therapy's complacent. It's not excellent, and it's not benefiting the patient. So I love co-treating because I just get to learn so much from my colleagues. We have a very like specific way we set Burke up, because there's so much that we can do with music. Giving that option to people can just be like a little daunting. So when we set up the program, we kind of singled out 3 different things. So we singled out like aphasia or like expressive language, left neglect, and gait training. And here at the hospital, I always do gait training and co-treatment with the physical therapist or a physical therapist. Usually they're primary, which is also just a lot of fun because we get to kind of go back and forth on ideas. Obviously, we're staying safe, and I can really focus on like the music intervention. And then for occupational therapy and speech therapy, they are always welcome to request a co-treat from me. And we do oftentimes if we want to like, if I'm like working with someone individually and we're like, well, I really want to work on their balance. So like, can we all like, but I don't want to stand with them alone. Like, let's co-treat and then we can collaborate and have just like more hands on deck and really like challenge the patient. And like same thing with speech. It's just like, okay, like here's what I'm doing that's working. Here's what you're doing what's working. Like, what can we do to give the best quality of care to this patient? Like, what do you possibly know that I'm not picking up? Or like, your notes are always completely different than my notes. Like, what are you doing that's working so well? Like that kind of vibe, which is very fun. I work on 3 units: our stroke unit, our brain injury unit, and our spinal cord unit. But I'm mostly on stroke and brain injury, so I just like know all the therapists at this point, and we're all very like, oh hey, like in the hallway, it's like, hey Vanessa, I have a patient for you. Like I'm gonna send you an email, or like, are you free tomorrow? Like let's set something up. Just because they also see the benefits of music therapy and they want their patients to benefit from it.
Speaking in terms of supervision now, what have you found works best for you as a supervisee? And also when you have students of your own that you're supervising, what do you try to bring to them? What do you try to offer?
I will always like first ask, I'm like, how do you want to take compliments and criticism? Right? Because like that's what we're here to do. We're here to learn. And I don't want you to think that like you doing something is like a negative, right? Like I just want you to be the best that you can be. So like I don't want you to think anything I say is like personal or all that stuff. Like has nothing to do with like our relationship. It's just like I want you to be a good therapist. And how best will you take advice, constructive criticism, compliments? And I'll usually like give some options just because people are like, what? So I'm like, would you like it written out at the end of the day? Would you like it, after the session, right? If we have like a break, do you want it in the moment? Like those are my 3 kind of ways to do it. I love like I like it in the moment. I grew up in theater. So like and like I don't want to say I have like a dance background because I don't, but like the people that ran my theater were like dancers. So it was very much like, you're wrong, get it together. um so like so I like it in the moment because then I can also be like, oh well, like I'm here right now, like let me try to fix it, and like then you can tell me if I did it better, right? Or if I'm on the right track. And like other people like it afterwards in like a workshop, so like just figuring out what helps your brain process information, what's going to best serve you, because I don't want you to feel overwhelmed more than you probably already are. So that's like the first thing I would say is like my supervision style as a supervisee
Yep.
is like, just give it to me and I'm going to try and fix it. And like, cause then it's also opens up for like collaboration and deeper, like picking up the brain in the moment where I can be like, well, why should I go like a different order than I did? Right. Or X, Y, and Z. I'm just a curious person. I'm happy to do anything to better and help people feel supported on their journey to be a music therapist.
In terms of self-care, how do you find that is incorporated into your routine, your work routine, keeping a work-life balance, all of that fun stuff? What do you find works best for you?
I keep a very intense calendar because I love being social. And I like doing things. And it's definitely like, I think there are 3 prongs to having good work-life balance. I feel like I'm making this up as I say it. The first one for me is I have a morning because it can get crazy here. schedules change. You don't know what you're walking into when you walk into a room sometimes, which is like fun, but it's important to like have some peace. So like I wake up probably around like 5:15, 5:30 in the morning. I like get up, drink something warm because like gut health. 2 out of the 5 days of the week, I work out, like make my breakfast, make lunch, and like read, do like the New York Times crosswords, like do something that like is relaxing to me. And like sometimes that's sleep in, but one of those, like something along those lines. So I can just like have time to myself. It is important to note that I do live alone. When I lived with a roommate and woke up at 5 to go like to the hospital, I felt so guilty that I stopped doing it. So one of the perks of living alone is you live on your own time. Then I like get to the hospital, blah blah blah. Second prong is like being consistent with your work boundaries, right? It's very easy to be like, oh my God, this thing is urgent and I need it right now. And you're like, okay, yes, right? And then you stay overtime. And then like that urgent, like that one time overtime becomes like once a week overtime or becomes like 3 times a week overtime. Not saying you can't put in hard work. It's important to work hard, but it's also important to know your boundaries, right? And say like, okay, this has to get done today. Like it really has to happen today. So I'm going to do it today. If it's like, no, you could do this tomorrow. Like no one will be upset with you if this is done by the end of the week. Go home. And just like being upfront with your supervisors, with your bosses of like, hey, this is going to take me a week. Do you need it before that? And if they're like, no, you're like, great. So just like being in that like being communicative, and keeping your boundaries firm, is the second prong of work-life balance for me at least. And then the third one is like setting aside fun time, or like creating plans. There's this really exciting book I love called The Art of Gathering, which just really talks about like why do people get together. And I'm very fortunate to have amazing people in my life and to have some really lovely friends that live near me and like are friends from many moons ago. So I am like one of those, kind of maybe like slightly annoying people that's like, hey, I'm free 3 weeks from now and I would like to see you. So like rather than like letting things be last minute, like I being intentional with my time and being intentional with the time I want to spend with other people, is how I stay happy in my social circles, because I think it's really easy to say, oh yeah, well like something will happen this weekend. And then nothing happens this weekend. And like sometimes nothing is a beautiful thing, right? But like if it's like really like, oh well, I want to do this thing, being intentional with who you spend your time with, or also being comfortable enough to do activities by yourself. I love taking myself out on little dates, and I take myself out to dinner and I just enjoy having that time myself, a little treat, a little pamper. And I think all these things like together make my life worthwhile.
Sounds like you
Like-
got it down.
Yeah. I was like, in terms of self-care for the job, I feel like that's definitely different. Like for the work that we do, I live by the motto of no thoughts, just vibes. Not at work, obviously, but in terms of like leaving my work at work. When I worked at home, it was a little different because like that is part of your space, right? But like I kind of kept it contained when I was working from home. I was like, well, this is the chair for work and everything else is not work. So like really trying to like keep those spaces different. So like once I leave the hospital, it's all like it's a tomorrow problem or it's a problem on Monday. And I can be fortunate enough to have that because it's not like I'm like administration or a doctor who has to be on call 24/7. So like really trying to think of like what rituals you can do to be like, it's done, you know? I use my commute, like I take the bus, because I don't drive. And it's like, okay, well, I'm on the bus and I'm like reading my little book and work is behind me. So I would say that's a big plus. Um, and then knowing that you're doing everything you can to make that person, you know, who they would like to be. You're doing whatever you can to help that person reach their goals. And you being a little bit, you know, down about that, or you being, you know, feeling like any level of guilt or anything like that is not going to help them reach their goals, right? It's like taking your ego out of it. It's not about me. Like I'm just the tool to help this person get better. It's about them. And like taking my emotions and ego out of the equation has made my life so much easier, in terms of like being able to know that I'm doing the best work possible.
Speaking a little bit about advocacy now, and kind of how you've talked about that's been a big part of your journey as a therapist, what do you find is really helpful with advocacy, and maybe some traits that are really helpful or things that you try to always have prepared or bring with you?
Big thing is knowing who you're talking to, right? So like you're going to talk differently to a therapist than you're going to talk to a doctor, and you're going to talk to a administrator, right? Because everyone has different vocabulary. So like I have like the pitch, right? Well, what is music therapy, right? Using music to help attain functional goals. And like most people, they say like, if maybe you don't work in healthcare, you'll be like, well, what's a functional goal? And then you go, if I'm talking to people that are not in healthcare, you go, oh, well, I use music to help people walk, talk, and, you know, live their lives. And they go, oh, that's crazy. I'm like, I know. But having like the right language for your audience, I think is a big point of that. If you're talking to a therapist, like you got to know the lingo, like you got to know the details. They're going to ask you for articles, right? Know the articles, follow up, send them the email with a folder with the articles, right? And then like the best thing in my opinion sometimes is having proof, right? Having a video of like, look at this patient that I worked with. Here's them before, here's them now, right? This is their diagnosis. This is when they came here. This is how far along they were post-diagnosis. All this extra information is going to be super beneficial. And you kind of have to get over it. You have to get over yourself a little bit and know that you want to make people feel good, and you want to give them that feel good feeling so that they want you around. We had an assemblywoman of New York come to donate money to the program. And they were like, well, we want you to do a demonstration, Vanessa. And I'm like, okay, like what's going to make this assemblywoman feel good and feel like she did a good job in donating her money to my program, right? So it's like, maybe you don't feel great about it, like ethically, where you're like, okay, well, I'm going to use this patient and we're going to do X, Y, and Z. And like, they're going to do great. And like, they'll see that like, he couldn't do this, you know, before the music, and with music, he can. And that's advocacy, right? Because people just don't know, and they want they want to feel good about it. They want to see the proof, and they want you to know what you're talking about. Right. So like that fine line of like using lingo, but like not using too much. So just like being cognizant of like the filter that you need to have, which I'm not great at. But like just knowing your audience and keeping in mind all of those things. Because you don't need to advocate to other music therapists. We're all on board, right? We made it. Like we're doing it. It's those people with, you know, that have been there for a long time, or are in therapies that have been around for a long time, that you want to advocate for, and just knowing how to to win them over almost. I also made sure to like co-treat with as many therapists when I first started as possible in like fairly public places so that other therapists could see what we were doing and go, oh, like that's what it is. Like that's what it looks like. That's what you can work on. Like that's a huge difference, because that's what makes sense.
Looking forward a bit, where do you think the profession of music therapy is going in the future? Where do you want to see it grow? Where do you think it's already growing? And what do you think is really in the works for music therapists as we go forward?
I think that my answer is like kind of grim. I obviously have a huge passion and love for music therapy, and I think that a lot of hospitals, at least, and facilities are more and more interested in it because it's gaining traction. There's, more articles out, there's more research, all this awesome, incredible stuff. And like you see, like there are hospitals that staff, like multiple music therapists, which is just like super exciting. Where the issue that I have, right, with this is that there aren't enough people that fit the profile. Because people don't know about it. There are so many people that I know that like they're like, man, if I knew about that, like I don't know if I would have been an X, Y, and Z, right? So like you have to be a skilled musician, right? So you have to go to a music school to study music therapy, right? It's a bachelor's of music or it's a master's of arts in music therapy. So you had to have done music for, a few years at least and be good at it to get into the door of like the audition room, right? Into the school. So like that's already like, in my opinion, a level of privilege that not a lot of people have. A lot of people can't afford like music training. It's expensive. And then, there are people that don't have music training, but they might not be interested in being a therapist, right? They're like, well, I'm really good at the drums and I'm going to play the drums, right? Why would I do music therapy? That sounds like the opposite of what I want to do. I just want to play, right? So you have to have somebody who's a good musician. And then you have to have somebody who's interested in clinical work or interested in science or interested in psychology or interested in all this stuff, but like not just like out of curiosity or understanding, but wanting to make a clinical difference, want to make a difference in people's lives, do the hard work, be on the ground. So like finding those two types of people is really challenging. And then, you're asking them to go into a market that isn't guaranteed at the moment. Another unfortunate circumstance. And then or have to carve out their own path, right? In a similar way. Like I didn't really carve out my own path. I was given an opportunity and took advantage of it. But a lot of people are going out there and they're doing all these in-services for facilities, and facilities give them a day, 2 days at their facility, right? And they say, oh, maybe we'll grow from there. Like it's hard. It's hard work. So I just think it's hard to find the people to create the possibility of what music therapy could be, because it takes a certain level of grit and skill and talent, like, and all of these things. It's like, maybe I'm just being naive, but I'm like, how could there be so many people that have all of those things? And then also be like good at it, right? Because you could get people that like want to do all that stuff and have the ability, but like maybe they're just like not great at it. I hate to say that. But yes, that is my stance on the field and as a whole.
I think that's all the questions I have. Jenna, do you have anything else?
Yeah, I think that is all of ours. Is there anything that we didn't ask you about today that you would like to add in, Vanessa?
I would say just be curious. Like, don't be afraid to go down rabbit holes of information if it interests you. There's nothing that I have done in my life that has not served me as a therapist, right? So like even the littlest things that like you're like, oh, well, like that one time when I was in high school, I did this thing, right? Like it's going to serve you because, right, experience in life is going to help you build rapport, right? Um, it's going to make you more relatable back into like skills you didn't even think you had when you're a music therapist, and be like, oh my God, I remember that one time when I was like a child and my teacher made me do all those boom whackers, and like that one song, do I need to remember that song? Like it's just like, be curious, don't be afraid to like go off on a tangent, because you'll be able to bring it back, if you really care about, like if you really want to do it, like you will. So that's my big piece of advice is don't be afraid to explore other things, because end of the day you'll probably come back to the music.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, we appreciate you joining us here today. This has been so wonderful to get to know you, to get to hear your perspectives. Thank you so much.
Of course, thank you guys for letting me just ramble on for an hour.